Hello everyone, I'm Calliope. I hail from Carmel by the Sea, a quaint coastal town in California. My upbringing was modest, with my family just managing to get by, which meant college wasn't an option for me, unlike many of my peers. Right after finishing high school, I took a job as a sales clerk at a supermarket to help support my family. Life presented its challenges, but I understood the necessity of contributing to our household income. In early 2020, at the age of 25, I met my husband and we got married. He, 3 years my senior, worked as an auto mechanic at a local garage. His calm demeanor and apparent trustworthiness convinced me we could build a steady life together. My husband is of Chinese-American descent. His mother is American, while his father hails from China. Their family is a unique blend of two distinct cultures. My mother-in-law embodies the classic American spirit, being open and sociable, always striving to uphold traditional American family values. She leads a modern lifestyle, engaging in community activities like yoga and various social events. She is kind and courteous, often expressing concern for me, at least outwardly. Conversely, my father-in-law reflects the traditional and conservative mindset of an older generation Chinese gentleman. At 52, he exudes an exterior calmness that belies his unpredictable nature. Having initially worked in construction upon arriving in the U.S., he eventually became a small manager in a machine shop. Even in retirement, he remains the family's spiritual leader. After our marriage, despite our modest means, I felt content. We embraced a simple lifestyle, finding happiness in everyday moments. I trusted that our shared life would be fulfilling as long as we were together. Yet, I didn't foresee how mental and physical shortcomings would gradually erode our contentment. To be frank, despite my husband's robust appearance, he struggles with certain weaknesses. This issue became significant, and I was at a loss on how to handle it. He frequently experiences premature ejaculation, and each occurrence leaves me silently disappointed. I endeavored to prevent this from affecting us, but its persistence made our lives increasingly mundane and void. Our situation became more pressing after a year of marriage with no children. This placed additional pressure on me. As my husband is the only son, the responsibility of continuing the family line fell heavily on us. His younger sister is still in college, with marriage and children not yet on her horizon. Thus, the burden of fulfilling family expectations rested solely on us, becoming an inescapable weight for me. I felt immense pressure, both from his family and myself. My husband, too, felt it, but remained silent, opting to work harder instead of confronting it. Meanwhile, I faced the unspoken questions from my mother-in-law and my father-in-law's scrutinizing gaze daily. I knew they had high expectations, even demands, of me, yet I was at a loss on how to address the issue when my husband shunned confrontation. Our relationship began to fray, with unspoken details gradually unraveling our marriage. One evening, his parents summoned us for a serious discussion. The tension was palpable before they even spoke. When my mother-in-law gently proposed consulting a doctor to investigate any potential issues, I wasn't taken aback. I had anticipated this conversation for quite some time. The issue of not having children had clearly become a pressing concern for my in-laws. Despite my mother-in-law's gentle approach, the pressure loomed over me like a heavy cloud. I sat quietly, focusing on my hands, as she explained her desire to ensure everything was all right, that no significant issues existed. Her words implied more than they said, hinting at doubts about my fertility. In that moment, a wave of undeserved shame washed over me, as though I were solely to blame. My husband reacted differently, sitting upright with a tense expression. He immediately dismissed the idea of any tests, his tone sharp. It was clear he was trying to protect his pride, unwilling to consider the possibility of an issue on his part. Whenever I broached the topic, he dismissed it, treating it as an unfounded worry. Yet, the reality was that this unspoken issue had cast a long shadow over our lives. My in-laws looked at him, the room's atmosphere growing more suffocating by the second. Silence prevailed, heavy with unspoken disappointment. I felt trapped between two worlds, the duty of a wife to continue the family lineage and my husband's refusal to confront reality, leaving me unsure of how to proceed. As time went on, the household's atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Meals became tense encounters. Each interaction with my in-laws brought an invisible pressure, their inquiries and encouragements cutting deeply into my fears. Our lack of children had become a hidden wound, growing more painful with each passing day. Then, one evening in September 2021, events unfolded that irrevocably altered my life. My husband had a work party and returned home late. My mother-in-law attended her usual yoga class with friends, leaving just my father-in-law and me at home. I never imagined he could pose any threat to me. I regarded him as family, though our relationship was never particularly close. After a long workday, I showered and changed into a comfortable short dress at home. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for us both, treating it as an ordinary family meal. I vividly recall entering the living room to find my father-in-law sitting, gazing at me with an odd expression I initially dismissed. I called him to dinner, as was customary. He rose and slowly made his way to the kitchen. Everything seemed normal at first, but an inexplicable unease lingered. After dinner, as I stood washing dishes, the kitchen was quiet save for the running water, and I focused on my task, oblivious to what was about to transpire. Suddenly, I felt arms encircle my waist, hugging me tightly from behind. Startled, I turned in panic to find it was my father-in-law. In that instant, I was paralyzed, unable to process the reality of the situation. I longed to scream, to push him away, but he silenced me. I was trapped, my pleas swallowed by the oppressive silence. He held me close, and as I remained in shock, he whispered his intent to help me conceive. A chill shot down my spine at his words. His statement filled me with revulsion, yet I was powerless, frozen in the moment. Before I could react, he acted swiftly and violently, leaving me no time to resist. The experience was utterly terrifying. A numbness enveloped me, leaving me frozen and powerless to stop what was happening. Once it ended, I crumpled to the floor, clutching my head and sobbing. Shame, disgust, and fear entwined, nearly suffocating me. My father-in-law, with an unsettling calmness, remarked that his actions were for the family's happiness. He then departed, leaving me in a state of turmoil and despair. That night, I couldn't bring myself to tell my husband. I was uncertain about how to handle the situation, fearing that speaking out would lead to irreparable damage to our marriage. I chose silence, swallowing the pain and fear, pretending nothing had transpired. But after that first incident, nothing felt the same. I struggled to maintain normalcy, acting as if everything was unchanged. Yet, whenever I faced my father-in-law, a shiver of fear coursed through me. His gaze was different, no longer indifferent and calm, but filled with a possessiveness and desire I hadn't seen before. That gaze bewildered and frightened me, trapping me in a spiral of guilt and torment from which I couldn't escape. Then, on another evening not long after, my husband stayed late at work, and my mother-in-law went to yoga as usual. Alone at home, unease settled over me. The dread of encountering my father-in-law haunted me when we were alone. That evening, when he entered the house, I sensed the worst was imminent. This time, he approached me directly, pulling me into a room before I could comprehend what was happening. Everything unfolded too quickly for me to react or resist. The door closed, and in the confined space, I could feel his breath near my ear. He was more forceful this time. My attempts to resist only seemed to fuel his determination. I tried to push him away, but his grip tightened, forcing me to confront the inescapable reality of the situation. Despite the terror, I was struck by his competence. My father-in-law, at 52, exhibited strength and prowess that my husband lacked. Although my husband appeared robust, he was always hasty and unfulfilling in our intimacy, leading to my growing disappointment and emotional distance. In contrast, my father-in-law's actions were deliberate and powerful. As much as I resisted acknowledging it, deep down, I felt something with him that I never experienced with my husband. Pleasure mingled with guilt, fear intertwined with shame. I felt trapped in a situation from which I couldn't extricate myself. Afterward, I sat heavy-hearted, while he behaved as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, as though it were simply a part of life that I must accept. From then on, my father-in-law and I became even more secretive. Whenever my husband was away or my mother-in-law was occupied, he would seize the opportunity to approach me. Each encounter was charged with tension, yet something inexplicably drew me to him, despite all logic and resistance. It was a complex mix of hatred and repressed desire, binding me to this forbidden relationship. We both knew our actions were wrong, yet neither of us seemed able to stop. I found myself sinking deeper into this entanglement, caught between guilt and emotions I couldn't control. About a year later, I gave birth to a son, the long-anticipated child that relieved the family's sustained pressure. To everyone else, the birth of my son symbolized joy and the completion of our family, but for me, it was a constant reminder of a harrowing secret I carried alone. As I cradled my son, a mix of love and pain overwhelmed me, leaving me to wonder if he would ever know the true circumstances of his birth. Each time I held him, the weight in my heart was undeniable. After he was born, my husband and I moved out, and while our child brought him happiness and a sense of peace, I was acutely aware of an invisible barrier between us. The closeness we once shared had dissipated entirely. Every glance into my husband's eyes reminded me of the unforgivable secret I harbored. My conscience tormented me daily, plagued by guilt that never relented. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. I feared that confessing would unravel everything, our life, our family, our son, everything could crumble. I wasn't prepared to face those consequences. Instead, I chose silence, internalizing the pain, and living in a suffocating pretense. Each day, I acted as if nothing was wrong, as if I didn't harbor a terrible secret, yet the divide between us felt ever present. Even though he remains unaware, the guilt toward my husband is persistent. I feel as though I've betrayed him, both physically and emotionally. But I'm trapped, unable to escape this cycle, as the truth feels too painful to voice, and the silence threatens to consume me. I'm left standing here, burdened by heartache, unsure of my next step. My son, my husband, my family, everything feels so precarious, as if one confession could destroy it all. But I can't endure this guilt indefinitely. I question whether I should reveal the truth to my husband about what transpired, the secret relationship with my father-in-law, and the real reason for my daily guilt. Would he forgive me if I did? Our lives would likely never be the same, and I might lose everything. Or should I continue to bury this secret, protecting my family and shielding my child from potential upheaval? Living with this torment could preserve our family, but the silence is eroding me, making it impossible to escape the pain and shame. I genuinely don't know what to do. If you were in my position, what would you do? Should I confess to liberate myself, or remain silent to protect my family? I desperately need guidance from those who understand this predicament.